Hello and welcome everybody back to the Inside Our Galaxy podcast. I'm your host, Eric Hernandez. As always, we got to talk about our big win at home against Sporting Kansas City, which was a 4-2 win. A lot of goals, a lot of great things to come from this team after the break. We're going to talk about that game, give our thoughts, our opinions about that game, how we feel. And yeah, we're just going to give our thoughts about that. Of course, there's going to be a lot to talk about that. There's a lot of Galaxy news to talk about. Some players leaving, some players, more player rumors of sorts of things like that. And so obviously there's a lot of Galaxy news. And of course, this week we do have a 2-game week with NYCFC on Wednesday and Real Salt Lake at Real Salt Lake this Saturday. So 2 big games this week for the Galaxy. So there's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to have conversations about, good conversations. And of course, we're glad you're all here. Of course, we did take a little break and we're glad you're here, back with us to talk about the Galaxy. So yeah, it's great to be back. And of course, with me as always is my co-host, LA Galaxy Central. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm enjoying the Euros right now. Obviously a busy week coming up. I'll be at all 3 Galaxy games this week. So yeah, definitely a very busy week. But yeah, it feels good to be back. Feels good that we got a win. And yeah, I'm ready to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely for sure. A massive win at home. And yeah, obviously, the Euros start. I know Copa America starts. So obviously there's a lot of soccer, a lot of football to talk about just in general. But of course, we still got the Galaxy to talk about. And this is a Galaxy podcast, of course. So we're going to talk about the Galaxy and things like that. But how was your break? Even though since we didn't record last week, how was your break? Anything you did interesting?
I mean, not really. The break was fine. It was kind of nice just to take a little bit of time off. Obviously, sitting on that Chicago game from 2 weeks didn't really feel good at all. But yeah, I was watching the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, which are still going on right now. I was watching, obviously, some of the Euros, still watching them right now. But yeah, the break was fine. It was pretty chill, but obviously I'm happy to be back right now for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Break was pretty cool. Got to go to another festival, which I've been going to a lot this year. But yeah, I went to a festival. That was pretty good. But yeah, I mean, just same thing, just chilling, watching sports as always. If the Galaxy's not playing, I always find something else to watch or do. So yeah, obviously the break was nice. I know you were actually on another Galaxy podcast. You were on with the Cuna Galaxia guys, Rob and Anada there on Monday, which is pretty nice. I just want to, just briefly, how was that? Obviously, I know I couldn't join in, but obviously, how was that being on another podcast as well?
It was great. They did an outstanding job. They made me feel very welcomed. I was very happy to be there. It was very cool to work with another Galaxy podcast. And yeah, obviously love to join back. It's a very good podcast, and I was very happy I joined.
Yeah, shout out to those guys. Obviously, they do great work. Like I said, I couldn't join because I was working, because I work on Monday nights, so I wasn't able to join in. And I know those guys record Mondays and Thursdays, which again, I happen to work Thursday nights and Monday nights, so I know I couldn't go in. I want to join in hopefully next time, so we'll figure something out. But of course, yeah, that was good to see you on another Galaxy podcast. Of course, spread word of our podcast and hopefully we get more listeners and subscribers that way. But anyways, of course, let's talk about the Galaxy because we haven't been here for a week. So let's talk about our win that happened on Saturday. Like I said, it was a 4-2 win against Kansas City. A big win. No Ricky Puig in this game because he was questionable going into the game. Ended up sitting him out because of a groin injury. Apparently he might come back maybe this week. We'll see how that goes. But of course, in terms of the Kansas City game, was not available. Everybody obviously had their concerns with no Ricky because we know how this Galaxy team can be without Ricky. They don't really produce much. They don't have that spark that Ricky normally brings into the game. But seemingly it was no problem because we scored 4 goals and you got to see players step up. You got to see Joseph Payne still back. Gabriel Peck took over this game. Joveljic gets his 10th. And Miguel Berry gets his 2nd goal of the season. Again, another player who I guess, doesn't normally score but gets a goal in this one to help contribute to the win. But again, massive win at home, especially coming off of that Chicago game a couple weeks ago. But yeah, definitely good to know that we got that win at home, still undefeated at home. So, yeah, man, I mean, obviously, what are your thoughts about the game? How'd you feel about them? And yeah, break it down for me, man.
Yeah, obviously a massive win at home. We were definitely looking for a response, and we got that response right against a struggling Kansas City team that previously had not won in the last 10 games, but then during the international break they finally won. Which I'm going to say, I think that was a really big deal for the Galaxy. Like, if Kansas City came in here 11 games winless, I think that would put a lot of pressure on us. So the fact that Kansas City got a win, I think that relieved some of the pressure on us and kind of gave us a wake-up call, like, hey, we have to show up to this game. We have to play them like we would any other team, and I think we did that really well. Obviously, hearing Ricky was out 24 hours before the game was very upsetting, which I mean, again, you got to look at the medical staff and say, like, how is a player like that played before the international break? We have 2 weeks off. Now he's not available. You also have Brugman, who's not going to be available for a couple weeks. So that's very disappointing in itself. But the players we had out there stepped up. They really did step up. We scored the first goal yet again in the match for the third time in a row. Something we were very critical of, which we should have been critical of, but it's good to see that we're getting off to the right starts now. It's a really back and forth game. It's good we got the second goal, but Kansas City, you gotta give them credit. They stayed in the match. They found ways to cut the lead in half every single time. But then eventually we were able to put the game away, and I think that was a good way to do it. We managed the game pretty well, even though I will say we were kind of sloppy defensively, but we did enough on the day. Our best players stepped up. Our DPs were productive. Everyone got on the board. You saw the guys you wanted to score ultimately get in the offense really well. And yeah, definitely a good win. A good win at home. We remained undefeated at home, and it was a good win to pick up, a win we much needed after that disappointing Chicago game.
Yeah, definitely a much needed win for sure for this Galaxy team. And yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, you got to see the players that you needed to step up in this game. And like I mentioned, as I listed off the people who scored, like those guys really stepped up. And you needed those guys to step up without Ricky Puig. And that's sort of the thing about, the DPs that we've had this, and not even just necessarily the DPs, but just in general, our team that, some players are able to step up when one of our players are down, like a Ricky Puig or like a Gaston Brugman. So it's like, if one of those guys are done, or are not available, it's the next man up, right? Next man up mentality. And yeah, I mean, obviously you got to see a lot of production. Obviously in the first half, it was very close. You didn't get to see any early goals. I think when Dejan scored, it was around the 40th minute, I believe. So it was very late into the first half where we got that goal. But yeah, those moments in the beginning where we couldn't get our goal, we were getting our chances as well. It's the same thing with Kansas City. And, when Dejan gets that first goal, obviously that's a big relief for us. And, and you mentioned like, times to score, right? We end up getting that later in the first half, which is not a good thing for Kansas City. But also, like you mentioned, Kansas City did play, they were in the game, and they're a team that always, sticks them, like, keeps themselves within the game, right? They're always a team that's not going to back down. Even when they're not playing that good this season, they're a team that's always going to be in the mix of some sorts, whether it's the game itself or in the standings, whatever the case may be, right? So Kansas City always has, that team to where they can compete, but right now, I guess in the standings, they just don't look that way. But still, though, on the field, they do. So yeah, they gave us the fight. It was kind of back and forth, but like you mentioned, we ended up closing out the game. We got that fourth goal, and late in the game as well. So it's like you needed that to really seal the game and make sure Kansas City wouldn't come back. And yeah, of course, I mean, you can't be too mad about it. Of course, you get the 3 points at home. You got to maximize those points at home. And yeah, obviously, I think offensively we had a great night. Defensively, like you said, it was a bit shaky, maybe not the best, but we'll get into that later when we talk about the defense. But of course, overall, I think you have to be happy with this win, especially getting this win, going into a week like this one where we have 2 games in a row.
Would you agree, though, the fact that Kansas City won last week was beneficial to us? Because if Kansas City came in here on an 11-game winless run after losing, like, I think 8 games in a row, like, wouldn't that put a lot of pressure on the Galaxy? And after they let a team on a 9-game winless run win, like, I think the fact that Kansas City won last week against Seattle and they weren't coming in on this long winless run, I think that was almost, psychologically good for us considering what happened in Chicago.
Yeah, I agree with you on that because if you look back at the Chicago game, what was something that, like, going into that game was that, like, a lot of the players were like for example, Dejan, his quote was like, hey, like, we think we can get that 3rd game in a row, right? They had this mentality. Now, I don't want to say they felt like they had the game sealed already, but of course they obviously saw how Chicago was on that winless run, had a good chance, and they crapped the bed, right? So I think, excuse me, but I think yes, in terms of Kansas City winning that game against Seattle, yeah, that does help the Galaxy in a sense because now they're more aware. It's like, hey, this team just came off a win, and they didn't go through a break. We did, so it's like like you said, psychologically and I think mentally, it's kind of like, all right, we have to keep our 10 toes down, try to be cautious with this Kansas City team, especially coming off a win. So yeah, I mean, obviously, and it's also a conference rival or conference team, so it's like you don't want to give them momentum. You don't want to try to keep that momentum of them winning after that Seattle win. So I guess it's like, I would agree in the sense that, yes, the Galaxy kind of looked at this game and saying, like, hey, we got to still be focused. They just came off a win. And I think, yeah, like, if they would have lost, I think maybe there could have been a similar thing like that happened in Chicago where they felt like they had that win locked up, but luckily they didn't have that mentality. And I think that's also another thing about this game as well, is that they went in with the right mentality, the right mindset of trying to go in and win this game at home, and especially against a Kansas City team that, like I mentioned, is always tries to find a way to stay in it. So yes, I think that in a sense that game did help us for sure.
I'll just say it was a wake-up call, definitely, because if Kansas City came in here on an 11-game winless run, like, I'm just worried, like, we would kind of, like, have a lot of pressure on us. Like, we just ended a 9-game winless run. Now they have an 11-game winless run with 8 losses in a row. You would just be like, I don't know, is this going to happen again? And we'd play kind of nervous, probably kind of anxious. The fact that Kansas City won the week before, I think is just a really good wake-up call, like, for us to really play well. And it kind of took away a lot of pressure from us, and I think definitely that probably did help us. And when I saw Kansas City win that game, I thought that might help us going into next week compared if they still had an 11-game winless run going for them into this game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, again, there's always a thing about mentality, right? It's like there's always things that, like, just in general, sports always has like a mental aspect to it, and I think, yeah, like maybe the Galaxy just would have had a different mindset if that Kansas City team still hadn't gotten a win yet in their winless run, right? So I think them winning did help them a little bit, like in a sense, but yeah, I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, the Galaxy went in with the right mindset, so you can't be, you know, like, that's just what they need to do, right? Just get into the right mindset, knowing that they can't come in, hopefully in getting those 3 points at home or stealing a point at home, whatever the case may be. You got to get those home points at home, and the Galaxy did what they needed to do. They were focused. They wanted to get that win, and again, especially after that Chicago loss. So, they went in with the right mindset, and I think, yeah, maybe I guess the Sporting KC win before probably would have helped them a little bit in a sense. Yeah. But anyways, of course, yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of great things. Do you want to talk about players, or do you have anything else to say about this game?
One thing that I think was very important for us in this game is that we were very clinical with our chances. Like, I think we created about 6 chances, 4 of them resulted in goals. And when you're down your star playmaker who creates a lot of opportunities, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take for you to be clinical, and I think we were clinical on the day, which is something we've talked about in the past. But against Kansas City, we were very clinical.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the chances that we got, and we did create a lot of chances. And like, sure, in the beginning of the game, we had those chances and we weren't necessarily as clinical. But once we got that first goal, I think that's where you got to see a lot more of the team being more clinical, being on target, things like that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously you got to respect that because, especially again, same thing with the Chicago game. It's like we didn't really have that many chances, and even if we did, they weren't really clinical at all, right? So I think when you compare last game and you compare this game, it's definitely almost night and day, and the Galaxy definitely woke up in this game, and they were a lot more clinical, and they were a lot more aware in this game, and I think that they needed to be like that in this game against Kansas City, right? So yeah, obviously we were a lot more clinical, and I think, yeah, I mean, obviously I think offense, we were pretty good on the night. I mean, 4 goals. All your players got goals in this, or all your star players got goal in this one, plus Miguel Berry, I guess. But, at least all your star players did get a goal in this game, and you needed those guys to step up as well. So, yeah, I mean, definitely offensively, and we were definitely really clinical, and we were good on the night. But anyways, I think we should talk a little bit about the players now, and just in sense of the individual performances. So let's start off with the defense. Defense, I actually don't remember who started. Obviously, McCarthy was in goal. You had Nicky Yamane as your right back. Maya Yoshida was your center back. Jalen Neal started, if I remember correctly. Jalen Neal started, and then Julian Aude was your left back. Of course, we did let in 2 goals, 1 set piece. With the first goal, I think we were caught ball watching on that one a little bit, and yeah, obviously we still get 2 goals scored on us in this game. But how'd you feel about the defense on this one, and what were your thoughts about it?
You want to know what's strange is I feel like as individuals, they all played really well, but collectively, like, I feel like they did a lot worse, which we can kind of talk about that a little bit. But yeah, obviously 2 goals against you, not very good. I can live with the first goal maybe they conceded. It was a good play by Kansas City, although I will say the Galaxy could have done a little bit better there. They let the cross get in a little too easily, but it's also kind of a good finish. Maybe Jalen Neal could have been tighter, but you can kind of live with that goal. But the second goal we conceded, I think, was inexcusable because for 2 reasons. One, you had a 3-1 lead after making the lead 2-1, so that should have been the opportunity for you to really switch on and focus and not let in another goal. And then also, it was a set piece, and a very just poor set piece to let in. Johnny Russell took the free kick almost from like midfield, and he was the only person over the ball, so he knew it was going to be a left-footed in-swinger. And then not only did we know it was going to be him taking it, we also left the defender just wide open to tap it in. Like, I don't know how you leave a guy that wide open, like 2 or 3 yards away from your goal. That's an inexcusable goal to let in. But as individuals, I feel like a lot of them kind of did have a good game. They just had some lapses, and those lapses can result in goals, and that's exactly what they did. But overall, I feel like they didn't play too bad, but also, like, you could say they let in some chances to Kansas City too. Like, I know they had some other chances to possibly, take the lead in the first half or tie the game. So it's kind of weird, like what I was talking about. Like, as individuals, I think they did pretty good, but like collectively, they were shaky. 2 goals against, a lot of chances against us. So I don't know. They definitely need to figure it out for sure, especially going into this week, which is really tough.
Yeah, I mean the defense had their moments. Like obviously, you saw McCarthy get that one pretty good save in the second half. You saw Yamane also contribute offensively when he gave that pass to Gabriel Peck, which ultimately led to the Joseph Painstill goal. So I think I think individually they had their moments. But yeah, collectively it just wasn't good. And you can look at it within those 2 goals, right? I think the first goal, they were caught ball watching a bit. Like I think they could have done better on that play. I mean, yes, could you live with it? Sure, but at the same time, it's like I feel like they should have done much better in that goal. But it was also a good finish, so you can't really blame um, them for that either. And then yeah, obviously set pieces. What more can we say? I mean, it's been the Achilles heel for the Galaxy this season, and I mean, realistically, I mean, we're already halfway through the season. I don't think there's any there's any chance of us fixing that. Like, I mean, it's just kind of who we are, and I guess that's going to be the big weakness for the Galaxy, and might be the difference maker between some games, right? So yeah, I mean, obviously, I think individually we were probably. I can see some individual performances that were better, but collectively as a unit, I think there was just those moments where we weren't good, and yeah, I mean, obviously it was it wasn't great, it wasn't bad either, obviously, but we got to be a little bit more better when it comes to letting those goals in, right? Because there's some simple mistakes that we do that can cost big, and I think that's always been the problem with the Galaxy. Is just that they have these small, simple problems, and they, it creates a disaster, right? So I think that's just the only thing about it. But I mean, still though, I guess they played okay. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, I guess, in a sense. But they played okay, and yeah, you're right. I agree. Like after the that once we got the 3-1, that should have been the spark to like, hey, let's play a lot better, let's play a lot cleaner. And try to just make sure that Kansas City doesn't get back into this game, and we mess up on a set piece, and again, luckily we end up getting the fourth goal, which helped us a lot. But still, though, I think defensively we just can't keep making those type of errors, because they could be the difference making in a game. What if Kansas City ended up getting the third goal and ends up being 3-3? Like that could have been a possibility, right? So it's like at the end of the day, we just got to clean up a little bit defensively. But yeah, I mean, obviously individually, if you want to look at it, it's like yeah, they had their moments, they played good, but I think as a unit we just got to be a lot better, maybe communicate a lot better as well. But anything else you want to say about the defense before we move on?
I mean, yeah, just going back to that point, like when the lead was 3-1, like I really thought at that point we were going to switch on, we were going to defend better, we were going to keep the 2 goal lead the rest of the way. That second goal was so upsetting to concede, honestly, because like, I don't know, I feel like once they made it 2-1, you really should have realized like this is the time to lock in, this is the time to close it down. But to let in a cheap goal like that, like again, that's kind of the difference between maybe us and maybe some of the elite teams in the league. The elite teams don't let in goals like that when the lead is 2 goals, but like we sometimes do. And yeah, that goal was definitely very disappointing to let in, but I mean, whatever. I guess you didn't lose the game or drop points, so you could live with it. But there's definitely a world in which maybe another attempt that could have resulted in drop points.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but maybe you can make the argument that you can't live with that, right? Because like you just mentioned, that kind of separates us between us and the elite teams in this league, right? It's like you got to be better on that. You got to clean that up, and you can't just give life to these teams, right? Because like I said, that could have given Kansas City a life. They could have tied that game. Hell, who knows? Maybe that gives them enough life to even win the game at home. You never know, right? So it's like we can't just be giving those errors and just letting these teams stay in it, right? And although Kansas City is a team that does find ways to stay in it, we just also can't gift them those chances to keep them in the game. So I think I agree with you in that aspect. It's just like it's just got to be a little bit more cleaner. It got to be a lot better from the team. But again, I mean, you end up winning the game, so I guess you kind of can live with it. But at the same time, it's got to be better from the defense for sure. But anyways, let's go into the midfield now. Of course, in the midfield, you did like we mentioned, there was no Ricky Puig, so you had Edwin Cerrillo, you had Diego Fagundes, and you had Mark Delgado in the midfield. So obviously, a different midfield. Mark Delgado is the only starter of that midfield that was available in this game, or a consistent starter at least. But yeah, obviously a different midfield. How'd you feel about this midfield, and what were your thoughts about it?
Yeah, the midfield was all right. Honestly, I think defensively they did a pretty good job. Some guys had a bounce back game. Like I think Cerrillo played a lot better than he did the last two games. Mark Delgado did all right. Diego Fagundes played simple, and I think that was beneficial to us. He did a lot of the simple things right, so that was good. I would still say like some of the passing was off, but like you'd probably expect that, right? Because Gaston Brugman was out, who's a line-breaking midfielder, and obviously Ricky Puig is out, who's our playmaker. So of course the passing is going to be worse in the midfield, and it definitely was. But for what we had out there in the midfield, I think they did, good enough for sure, pretty solid.
Yeah, I'd agree on that too. It was pretty solid from the midfield. Also, I think an interesting stat that I saw, online. I forgot who posted it. I think it might have been Alex Ruiz, but every time that Diego Fagundes has started this season, the Galaxy haven't lost. So there is that as well. So I mean, at least for right now with Diego Fagundes, you know that he is reliable. And you're right, like he did the simple things right, and that's sometimes good for the team. It's like you just got to do the simple things right, and I think he did the simple things in this game right. And yeah, I mean, I think the passes were off, but like you mentioned, you don't have Gaston, you don't have Ricky Puig, so that's going to affect that aspect of the midfield. But yeah, I think they did solid. I think Edwin Cerrillo, maybe not necessarily a huge bounce back, but definitely a little bit of a bounce back compared to what he had to deal with before the break. So definitely a lot better for him. And Mark Delgado, yeah, he played solid, did what he normally does, and yeah, I think the midfield just in general was solid. I mean, there's nothing, they did what you needed to do, and I think that's all you can ask for is just do your job and do the simple things right. And yeah, they did it. They did it right, and especially without Ricky Puig and without Gaston. So I think they did pretty good on that part of it.
I mean, honestly, though, is Edwin Cerrillo even a depth piece anymore? Because he starts so much and plays so much. It's almost like he's a full-time starter now. And he's going to start going forward, too, because Bergman's out the next couple of weeks, unfortunately.
I mean, in a sense, yeah. Like, I mean, at this point, he has started a lot of games, but I think that was, when we had that conversation before the season, we were just kind of like, how the role of Edwin Cerrillo was going to be, because it's like, well, you can look at it both ways. It's like, if Gaston ends up starting a lot, you still have Gaston Brugman as your starter, and then you have Edwin coming off the bench, which is a big plus. But the same thing goes the other way around. If Edwin is playing good and he's a consistent starter, you're going to have Gaston coming off the bench, which is still a pretty big plus. So it's like, either way you look at it, that was always going to be a big plus within the center defensive midfield role, right? So I think, it's like either way you look at it, like I think it's just a big plus in general. And yeah, I think Edwin right now is getting those minutes, and that's good for him because he's a young player. We know what he was capable of doing, last season and whenever he was with Dallas and things like that, right? So obviously he's going to have a big role, whether it was him coming off the bench or him starting games. And I think, right now he's learning how to be a bit of a starter. And although, like I mentioned before the break, he didn't have that great of a week, this one was a little bit of a bounce back. So I think, he's getting there. He's getting his moments. He's getting his opportunity. And I think he's making the most of it, even when it's, a positive performance or a negative one. Like, I think he's just getting the opportunities. And I think that's what's good as well. It's like you're giving these young guys an opportunity and a chance. So I think that's what's good from Edwin this season.
Yeah, it's definitely very important we trade for Edwin Cerrillo in the summertime, because imagine it was like seasons past where Bergman was our starting defensive midfielder. And think about who some of our defensive midfielders were in the past. Like as a backup, we had Uri Rosell last year. We had Adam Saldana, Carlos Harvey, Perry Kitchen. Like, I get it. The recency bias for Edwin Cerrillo probably isn't the best because he hasn't really had the best performances lately. But still, like, if Gaston Brugman was out and we had, like, for example, Uri Rosell starting all these games instead of Edwin Cerrillo, like, that would be a massive problem and that would hurt the Galaxy a lot. So it's really good you're seeing Will Kuntz's effect already, like, even with some of the depth being brought in, that the fact that Brugman cannot have a very healthy season and we still have a guy who's played a lot in MLS, started on winning teams before, able to come in and, try to impact the game, that's really good to have for sure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Again, like I mentioned, it's like you going into the season, which scenario you had, it was going to be a positive one. So I think right now, again, you're giving Edwin the experience, you're giving him the opportunities, and he's making the most of it. And again, like I said, if it's a positive one or a negative one, he's still getting those chances. So I think that's what's going to build him as a player. It's going to build him more as a starter. And again, I think he's got to make the most of it, and he is right now. In a sense, and yeah, I mean, obviously for Gaston, it's pretty big that he's out for a couple of weeks, but at least you're okay with Edwin taking the spot for right now because he's going to give it his all in a sense. So I think for Edwin, it's good for him in his development. So we gotta hopefully he just performs better and performs well when Gaston is out. And I think it's like I said, it's going to build him up as a player. Anything else about the midfield you want to add before we move on into the offense that had a good night?
Yeah, like obviously I said before, I think the passing was a little bit off, but that was to be expected. But at least defensively, you could say they made up for that.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Midfield played okay, and I think they did what they needed to do. They did their job, so can't be too mad about it. All right, now let's talk about the offense because, like I mentioned, we had 4 goals on the night. You had one from Gabriel Peck. You had one by Dejan, one by Painstill, which, by the way, he was a sub. I mean, the starters, I guess, was Joveljic, you had Peck, and you had Johnny Perez starting off the game. But, coming off the bench, you had Joseph Painstill scoring a goal. And also coming off the bench, you had Miguel Barry getting the final goal of the night. But, yeah, I mean, offense was pretty good, whether it was the starters or the bench. How'd you feel about the offense? What were your thoughts? And, yeah, just give me your thoughts about it.
Yeah, productive, very productive. Definitely scoring 4 goals without Ricky Pooch is very impressive. You saw a lot of guys step up. Joveljic gets his 10th on the year. That's really good. Also had an assist, which was good. Gabriel Peck had a goal. He had 2 assists from your DP player. That's really good. Joseph Painstill comes off the bench. He scores. That's really good in a transition opportunity. Then Miguel Barry ultimately closes the game for a comeback, so that was really good too. Overall, everybody stepped up offensively. That was really good. And to score 4 goals without Ricky Pooch, who's your playmaker, that's very impressive. Like I said earlier, we were clinical, right? We created a good amount of chances, maybe not a lot, but at least a good amount, and we converted on most of them, and that's exactly what has to happen when your playmaker's not available. So yeah, great night for the offense, and we were very efficient.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You got to step up even when one of your DPs isn't available. So, somebody had to step up, and seemingly everybody stepped up in the offense, right? Obviously, Dejan gets his 10th, which is massive, compared to what he had last season. It's pretty big for Dejan. It's pretty big for, this season, and just in general, just a bounce back season for Dejan. That's what you need from Dejan, is to just keep scoring, be the number 9 that we wanted him to be, and he's definitely delivered so far this first half of the season. So definitely he had a great night. Of course, Joseph Painstill being back was massive, and him getting a goal was also massive for him. Obviously, if he got that goal early on, that's going to help him. Hopefully that'll help him. For the second half of the season, knowing that he still has it, he's still able to contribute even after somewhat of a little bit of a lengthy break that he much needed, right? And then, of course, Miguel Barry, obviously, I think everybody, once they saw him go in, probably wasn't the happiest of seeing him go in, but he ends up getting a goal, and I think everybody was happy at the end of the night that he went in, right? So he ended up getting that goal. And then, of course, the last guy I want to talk about is, of course, the guy who was 100% man of the match, was Gabriel Peck. I mean, listen, when I talked about Gabriel Peck, I said, like, he's doing good as a DP. He's, giving you production, but we haven't necessarily seen him take over a game. And he definitely took over in this game. I mean, he was involved in all the goals, whether he scored, whether he assisted the goal. He was involved all night, and I think that's what you needed to see from Gabriel Peck to really say, like, hey, like, this is definitely what we needed to see. This is definitely the player that we signed, X amount of dollars for him, right? So it's just like we needed to see him take over a game, and I think definitely this was the game where he took over. Yes, people are going to say, well, it's because it was at home. He plays much better at home than away. Sure, that you can give that argument, but I think just in general, whether it was home or away, we just needed him to take over a game, and I think this was one where he definitely took over. I believe he made Team of the Week. I don't know if they've announced the Player of the Week. I know he was, in the running for it, so hopefully he does get that, because I think it was very much well deserved him getting that if he did get it. But Definitely for sure for Gabriel Peck, the man of the match, the guy you wanted to see step up and really take over a game, and he did, and he delivered. And I think, that's just massive for Gabriel Peck and, for this season and just in general for the team.
Yeah, honestly, Gabriel Peck with 1 goal and 2 assists. He was incredible on the night, really brought a lot of energy. He was more than just his numbers, too. Like, you really felt his presence on the game. He was all over the field, taking players on. Even got a lot of nutmegs, some back. He was almost putting on a show out there, really. It was definitely a 5-star performance from him. Did really well. Definitely needed him to step up when Joseph Panso wasn't available to start, Ricky Pooch wasn't available. That's the guy you're going to look to, right? Your other designated player that was on the field, and he definitely stepped up. That was a great performance from him.
Yeah, definitely, and especially the goal that he assisted to Miguel Berry, the way he took on that Kansas City defense. Whew, I mean, again, you were right. He was putting on a show that game, and again, it's great to see Gabriel Peck just take over like that because, and like you mentioned, you needed him to take over when Ricky was out and Joseph Payne's still not starting. It's like, we just needed to see that from Peck, and this is definitely one where I think a lot of people are going to look at Gabriel Peck and say, hey, like we're finally, and again, it's not that he hasn't been playing a bad season or hasn't been productive, like he has. It was just a matter of him really trying to step up when it mattered most, I guess, or whenever the team was down in some sort of way, and this was one where he definitely stepped up for sure, and I think that, again, just amazing to see that performance that he had, and is very much, and like I said, if he does get Player of the Week, that's very much well deserved, and hopefully he did. But yeah, obviously Peck, amazing performance, and hopefully that just builds off into the rest of the season for sure.
Unfortunately, Peck did not get Player of the Week because Kubo scored a hat-trick in 10 minutes, so he actually won Player of the Week, but Peck was a close second place.
Damn.
I mean, to be fair, a hat-trick in 10 minutes is it's hard to argue.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of hard to argue. And not only just in 10 minutes, I think it was within the final last 10 minutes of the game, right? I feel for Cincinnati, I believe. I didn't watch the game, but obviously I did know that that's what happened, or that they scored the hat trick within 9 minutes. But still, though, I mean, I guess if that performance didn't happen, I think 100% Gabriel Peck would have been, Player of the Week for sure. But nonetheless, that doesn't discount the fact that he had a massive game this week, regardless, right? So obviously for Gabriel Peck, that's what you needed. But anyways, anything about the offense you want to talk about before we move on?
Yeah, definitely very good, very clinical, very good to see. Got 4 goals. I mean, another thing that was kind of funny too, which it's not part of the offense, but apparently the rules don't apply to goalkeepers, right? I mean, forever, Tim Melia, just, I don't know. Jovic was in the way, and then it looks like, I don't know, Jovic, they gave him a yellow card for what exactly? That was kind of funny and interesting to see.
Yeah, that was just such a stupid card. Listen, I get it. Dejan did provoke Melia, I guess, if you want to take that into account. But the guy literally punched him. He literally punched Dejan. I don't get how that doesn't get a card in some sort of way. It's just and I was right there when that happened. So it's I was in the supporter section. I literally saw what happened, and it just made no sense how Tim Melia didn't get a fucking, card at all. So it's just I mean, I don't know. I guess yeah, you're right. I guess the rules don't apply to, goalkeepers, I guess. But, I don't know. I think that was just a stupid call, I guess, in a sense. Again, if you want to give Dejan the card because he provoked them, sure, you can give that argument, but at least Melia should have gotten a card with that as well. But whatever's, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, we won, so I guess whatever, fuck it. But, yeah, pretty stupid.
Yeah, I had one thing to say. Isn't it a red card and a penalty for us? Because whenever you make intentional contact to the face, that should always be a red card, right? And they had video review too, but it really is a true thing. When it comes to goalkeepers, the rules just don't apply for them. On corner kicks, on set pieces, on basically everything. They can be as rough as they want, kind of push anyone out the way, do whatever they want. But I wouldn't even say Jovic was provoking him. I just think he was trying to slow down the attack in a quick outlet. But apparently, they said he was trying to release the ball. But come on, clearly he wasn't. I don't know. Very weird play for sure.
I was going to say, he definitely was not ready to release the ball. He was definitely trying to scan around and trying to see who he was going to release the ball to. There was no way that he was about to release the ball. But, yeah, I mean, that was stupid. And I think, yes, it probably should have gone to review. But, I mean, I don't know. It's just a really stupid call. And, I mean, hey, that's pro refs, right? That's what you're going to get out of the referees and just in general, I guess, for goalkeepers. So it is what it is. But I was going to say, though, just before we move on, the subs, just in general, how'd you feel about the subs? Anything, I guess, Vanny as well. How'd you feel? How'd you feel that, how he managed the game and things like that? How'd you feel about the, the subs and management?
Yeah, so what subs do we make? I know we subbed on Cuevas, we subbed on Berry. Do we make any other ones? if I didn't
I know
recall.
Ruben Ramos went in and Tucker Lepley went in to make their debuts.
That was so
So
late though. Yeah, I know
it
that
was
too. I
it
forgot
was
about that.
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say like it was interesting though to see that they put on Cuevas and then like in the second half and then he came back and then they took him off later. Like I don't know if you noticed that, but that was pretty interesting. But I guess Johnny Perez was dealing with some I forget what he was dealing some discomfort. So I thought that was pretty interesting seeing that live. But then like when we found out what it was just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it was kind of weird how they subbed in Cuevas and then like 20 minutes later they subbed him out. Like I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, I did notice that, and I think it was fair on him to let him know ahead of time that he'd play 15 minutes, so he knew he was going to come off for Painstill. And Vanny said it was a gap compared to when they wanted to put Painstill on. So that made sense, and I'll just go into the subs right now. I think in general, like going back to that word, I think the subs made sense. They were fairly reasonable. I mean, as much as people don't like to see Miguel Berry on, like Joveljic, it made sense for him to come off at that point with about 9 or 10 minutes to go. Like that's a fair point to take him off. Again, Van didn't take off Gabriel Peck, which is really good. Like that's something he might have done in the past, which we would have been very unhappy about. He left him on the field. Yeah, overall, I think the subs were fair. They were solid. Cuevas did a pretty good job when he came on. Like, he brought a lot of energy, so that was good. And I think the goals were more so on the players rather than just Vanny managing the game poorly. I think that was more on the players, so I'd probably put it more on them. I think Vanny did a fairly good job, which I think we needed for sure after that Chicago game where he just did basically everything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for sure. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously managing the game was okay, and I think the subs made sense. I was gonna ask, or was gonna say though, because like obviously, like I mentioned, Tucker Lepley got his debut. Ruben Ramos technically got his pro debut. I mean, I don't want to look too much into it, but obviously, we did let go of some players. Like we let go of Daniel Aguirre. Obviously, the summer window's coming in close. Do you think you kind of find it interesting how they gave these young players a chance? Maybe it's kind of like Will Kuntz just trying to review what we have in G2 maybe or possibly or just even just in general, like just to kind of see what we have and maybe just kind of start preparing what we can see in the summer window and maybe we just have like a hidden gem, like if you get what I mean.
I mean, I see what you're trying to say, but at the same time, the opportunity was so short, you just can't come to any conclusions. They played for like 1 or 2 minutes, so it's like, I don't know, I can't really say anything about it. But yeah, it will be definitely interesting to see like what they could possibly contribute to this team. You never really know until you get a bigger sample size.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't play that much, but I just thought it was interesting how we did give some of these, or I said G2, but these Ventura County guys, like at least some minutes, even though it was like a couple minutes, maybe it's just kind of a chance to review what we got, even though we didn't really see much from them anyways. But I just thought that was kind of interesting in my opinion. But anyways, any other points you want to say about the game before we move on? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, much needed win. Definitely we needed to get that against Kansas City, who's been struggling all year after that very disappointing Chicago game coming out of a break. Having most of our team available, there was never any excuse not to get anything less than 3 points, and I'm glad we were able to score 4 goals and manage the game. And yeah, come out there with a win in a difficult week that's to come. I think that was a very important win to get.
Yeah, definitely for sure. You got to get those 3 points at home, maximize the points, and they did what they needed to do. So I think you can't be too mad about the performance. And like you mentioned, it's a tough week ahead of us, and you got to get that win before going into this week. But yeah, obviously great performance from the team and much needed 3 points. So can't be too mad about it. But we'll also talk about, of course, those two games coming up this week. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about some Galaxy news because we did take a break and there was some news that kind of floated during that break that we had. Let's talk first about the transfer that we made, which was Daniel Aguirre to Chivas. He ends up being official. He is now with Guadalajara. We end up getting, I believe it was 250K from for that transfer. So Daniel Aguirre moves on, goes with Chivas. We had heard about the rumors and things about that, before we went on break and things like that. So it's just like we knew that this was going to happen. It ends up being official. What were your brief thoughts about it since now that it's already happened? But what are your brief thoughts about Daniel Aguirre finally going to Guadalajara?
Yeah, definitely a very odd transfer for sure. I thought it was very confusing. I think it's definitely really good for the player, but for the two clubs, I don't really understand it for either side. Like the Galaxy had a depth midfielder who was, pretty solid, can play certain roles on a cheap contract, so it was kind of good to have around. And for Chivas, I don't really see like what they saw in him or what made him want to bring him into their squad. Like I know Chivas has been in the MLS market a little bit. They got Kate Cal from San Jose. They got Chicharito as a free agent. They've been interested in Alan Pulido before to bring him back. So they've kind of been around the market, but at the same time, when you see Cade Cowell, like a really good young player who's established himself in MLS, and you got Chicharito, who's a Mexican national team legend and is a proven goal scorer around the world, I just don't see like what Aguirre has brought to the table to really show like he should get that move there. But I mean, on his part, I definitely understand it. On the two clubs' part, I'm like, I don't think it really makes sense for either side.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Daniel Aguirre and they would have offered me that, I probably would have gone as well too, right? Like I think it's a good opportunity for him. But yeah, I mean, obviously it was an odd transfer. We didn't get much money from him either, so it's like kind of like, well, it's like sure we get some money, but is it really enough to make for like this coming summer window? Like, does that really make a big difference? Not really. So it's just like it is a bit of an odd transfer, and same thing for Chivas. Like I don't really know why they got him because I feel like it'll be the same thing for Chivas. I feel like he could be a depth piece whenever they're winning games, and they just need somebody to really just be there to control the game, which Daniel Aguirre was doing with the Galaxy. So I feel like the roles would still be similar when he goes to Chivas, but so I felt like it was an odd transfer just for that reason. But at the same time, it is Chivas. It's one of the biggest clubs in Mexico. It's one of the biggest clubs in the region, just in general. So I guess if an opportunity like that happens, I don't think you would pass it away. So for Daniel Aguirre's like my side, I guess like it makes sense. But I think for both sides, it's for both teams, I think it's very weird. But I will say as well for Daniel Aguirre, he has come a long way. Went undrafted, made it into G2 made it into G2, was a player there and made his mark there. Then got, went to the first team, got a good amount of minutes for the first team. Like, I mean, like we mentioned, he was still a depth player for us. He still got a good amount of minutes. So I think the story for Daniel Aguirre, for where he's come from and how his journey as a player, you can't be, it's like you got to be at least happy for the guy for how far he's come. So I think for Daniel Aguirre, it's good for him. I feel like we should be proud of him for stuff like that. So for Daniel Aguirre, hope everything goes well with Chivas. Obviously, I'll keep my eye out because I am a Chivas fan. So obviously I'll still keep an eye out on him. But for his sake, for the move, I guess it's good for him and his party, I guess.
You know what's funny is some people were saying that it was making room for Marco Reus. Like that's definitely not true because Aguirre was making like no money, so I don't really understand where people got that from.
Yeah, and even then there was the rumors, or just in general, saying like that we wouldn't have to move players for Marco Reus, which, like I don't, so like I don't really think Daniel Aguirre was just making room for Marco Reus. Like I really don't see that being the reason. I just think, like you said, I think it was just more the fact that Aguirre saw the opportunity to make a move to go to Chivas, and I think for him he wanted that for himself. So, and again we can't blame him for that, right? So it's just it's a good move for him, but again, it is an odd move just for both teams in general. But again, we hope for the best for him. But yeah, I don't think it's going to make room for Marco Reus at all. So that was the Daniel Aguirre news. Let's also talk about another player possibly joining Liga MX, which is Johnny Perez. During the break as well, that there were some rumors that there were multiple Liga MX clubs who were interested in Johnny Perez. A couple of the ones that were thrown out was Toluca, I believe it was San Luis. I think America was also in there, but point is there was a lot of multiple Liga MX teams that were interested in Johnny Perez. I guess two of them made some serious offers. We don't know the two clubs. That was also reported by Alex Ruiz whenever that news came out. But I mean, it's not surprising with the fact that Johnny Perez has played in Mexico for the youth national team. So I'm pretty sure a lot of Mexican scouts and a lot of Liga MX scouts are have been keeping an eye out for him. So it's not surprising that, Johnny Perez is getting those types of offers. But yeah, I mean, obviously it was kind of interesting because at the time we gave Johnny Perez some minutes and he made the most out of those minutes. And then out of nowhere, boom, a bunch of Liga MX teams are interested. So people found that interesting or kind of found that like weird. But yeah, Johnny Perez possibly moving to Liga MX. It's gone quiet now, of course, but anything could happen. So what are your thoughts about that? And just give me your thoughts about that whole rumor.
Yeah, America would definitely be really random. Like I can't see him going to a club like that, but at the same time I could never see Aguirre going to Chivas, so I guess anything's possible. But yeah, apparently Toluca was the club that was closest to him in advanced negotiations. But yeah, you're right, it has kind of gone quiet in the last couple of weeks. Perez even started the last game for the Galaxy, and if he had an advanced transfer, they probably would have held him out. Like the Ventura County did with Gino Vivi when he's moving on. So the fact that they didn't hold him out tells me like, maybe it's not on, maybe it won't happen. Maybe Vanny, kind of told him like, hey, you've proved you're a rotational piece now. You will have you consistently in games. And that can kind of push back a move a little bit. But yeah, definitely wouldn't like to lose him for sure. We already lost to Gary, who's a depth piece. I think Perez has a lot of potential too. Wouldn't be good to lose another depth piece already on a roster that is kind of thin in the first place. I think we need to try to keep him. And yeah, I think making him happy would probably be like giving him more playing time. And you could honestly say maybe he deserves it.
Yeah, and not only just the depth piece, and like how you've mentioned before, like a prospect, like that Johnny Perez's, ceiling is up there, right? Like obviously he has big potential to be a good player for the Galaxy. Of course, now we just got to give him more minutes. He has gotten more minutes, so obviously maybe we will start to get to see more Johnny Perez in the second half of the season. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if America was interested, considering the fact that I believe a lot of their players are out of contract. America is a team that tends to develop a lot of young players, well. So I don't think that's necessarily out of the picture for Johnny Perez and for America. But again, like they have gone quiet, and I don't know if if that is gonna happen. And also the fact is, I believe Johnny's family are Chivas fans as well. So obviously, I don't know if that plays effect into a role, but but still though, like a lot of teams would probably be in Liga MX would probably be interested in Johnny Perez. Hell, I think a lot of MLS teams would be interested in Johnny Perez to have a player like him on their team, right? So obviously Johnny Perez, a lot of people are going to have his eyes out on him, but yeah, I mean, obviously he's a prospect. He's a player that we've been wanting to see get more minutes. He's still very young, and we're just hoping that he gets more minutes this season, and hopefully that that helps the team a lot, and and it helps him for his career and his development. So obviously we'll see. I don't know if the move will happen, but I don't know. Like I just it would be interesting. It's interesting for sure, to say the least. But yeah, I mean, obviously it would be a pretty big blow if we managed to lose him within the summer window for sure.
Speaking of getting minutes, Garces is finally on the field now, which is good to see.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I heard that he has been playing with Ventura County, which is pretty good. So he's getting some minutes. Obviously, we've been wanting to see him get minutes in the first team, which actually I kind of want to ask you about that. How do you feel that he's just getting minutes with Ventura County? Like, do you think that's a good option? Just trying to get him used to, I guess, MLS in a sense. Like I know it's MLS Next Pro, but still it's still like the MLS style, I guess. It's like, do you think that's a good way to like slowly get him used to playing in MLS? Like what are your thoughts about him playing with Ventura County right now?
With his two performances with Ventura County, you gotta say like, maybe that's a good spot for him right now. Obviously it's worked well with Jalen Neal. He played on Ventura County for a little bit of time, eventually came up to the Galaxy at a young age, and then, he's arguably might be the star for the rest of the year. We'll see. You can say he's probably the leading candidate because Carceres and Zavaleta are probably not going to be your starter, so maybe that's a good thing for him. Get him some time, at least get him some development. He's getting starts there, he's getting minutes, so that's really good. But I mean, the first two games he hasn't really played that well for them, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen much of Ventura County, so I can't really say like if he played well or not. But I mean, I guess it's interesting that they're giving him minutes there. But hopefully that helps him with his development. Of course, we did sign him for a pretty lengthy deal. So like obviously, I think I guess of right now, like we don't have. It's not necessarily we don't have to rush him into the first team, I guess. So I guess there's that, but there was a time where we kind of did need a center back, so it's kind of like, okay, so when are we going to see Garces? But I guess maybe him being in Ventura County is just going to help him for his development. So yeah, I mean, obviously, hopefully he does well there, and then he slowly integrates with the first team. But I thought that was pretty interesting, of course. But anyways, let's talk about the next piece of Galaxy news, which was. Actually, that happened today, which was Gino Vivi going on loan to Deportivo Saprissa, which is one of the Costa Rican teams. I think it's one of the the bigger Costa Rican teams, might be even one of the biggest Costa Rican teams. He's on a 6-month loan, so obviously till the end of the year. Gino Vivi gets a loan out, which is very interesting. I know he's been playing very well with Ventura County. A lot of people were kind of like, why, if he's playing well with Ventura County, why would you, send him on loan? But I think that's kind of the reason why. It's like, all right, he's playing well with the MLS Next Pro team. Let's get him somewhere where he can get more minutes on a first team with a good, team in a league, right? Like because I think they're right now they're in first place, so he's gonna go to a first place team in Costa Rica, and he is Costa Rican, so it's like that. I don't think that's going to affect him when he goes there either. So it's like, Yeah, I mean, obviously it's an interesting move, but yeah, he's on a 6 month loan. So how'd you feel about that news with Gino Vivi, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, it definitely sucks for Ventura County because he's been a really good player for them, but a very good move for the player, right? And that's what you want from MLS Next Pro. You want to see players go to the next level. And again, you can talk about guys like Will Kuntz, and I think he's done an outstanding job even in this department too. You see a guy like Marcus Vercranis, play on Ventura County. He goes to the Australian A League. You see a guy like Gino Vivi, who was our draft pick. He's playing very well for Ventura County. Now he gets to go to one of the biggest clubs in Costa Rica in the top flight there. So it's really good. It definitely sucks for the team that they're losing some of their best players, but it's really good for the program in general that some of our players are getting really good opportunities elsewhere. And that's a great opportunity for him. I'm very happy for him. And also, that's going to help the Ventura County team going forward, too. The fact that they're able to send players elsewhere, that's going to make them a more attractive destination for other guys to try to come in because they can say, like, hey, I have a lot of potential. This team can get me to another level, too. They're good at developing guys. So I think it's a good look for the program, too. And yeah, definitely a good move for Gino Vivi. It's going to hurt the Ventura County's quality a lot because he's one of their best players, but can't fault him from taking the move, right? It's definitely a good opportunity, and hopefully he does well there.
No, yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to help him for his development, and not only just even let's just say like he does good over there. Either if he does well in Costa Rica, the Galaxy can bring him back in, and he could probably be a good piece for the first team, right? Because that's we're trying to develop him into the first team and things like that, right? He could probably possibly be a good asset to the first team, or if he does so well that Saprissa maybe wants to buy him, we get a transfer done, we get money in return. Gino Vivi goes somewhere where he's going to get more minutes and be a guy. So it's like either way you look at it, it's going to be good business for anybody, whether it's the Galaxy keeps him or they end up selling and making profit out of Gino Vivi and things like that. And I think that's also another thing, right? It's like it's either you got to develop guys to the point where they can be good assets to the team, or you develop guys to the point where they can be good players to sell and to give to teams, right? So I think that's another thing as well when it comes in terms to developing players. Like there's two aspects of it, and I think for Gino Vivi's sake, I think it could go either way, and I don't think anybody would be too mad about it if whichever way it went, right? Well, I guess depending how much we sell him for, if that was the case, but still though, I think for the player and for the team, it's definitely a win-win for sure, and I think it's going to help the player, and it's going to help, like you said, the program and the organization.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a massive boost for the program too, because like other players are going to want to come here if we're sending players to high level leagues and we're having a good MLS Next Pro team that makes good signings, that has good development. I think getting these players to other leagues too, like, would you agree, kind of helps the look of Ventura County and maybe bring in other future young players, going forward?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that, and not only just in terms of like, I guess like bringing in players from other MLS Next Pro teams or anything like that, but think about the academy, right? Think about how maybe some academy kids right now are going to have a chance to go into MLS Next Pro right now, right? So it's like you're also helping the academy in some sort of way, right? So it's like and I think yes, from the young perspective, maybe like a parent who has a kid who wants to be in an academy or anything like that, it's like, hey, like if I go with the Galaxy, like they're gonna develop my kid well, because whether he goes to Ventura County or possibly goes to the first team, whatever the case may be, it's like I think from the academy point to Ventura County, it's like I guess the transition could help a lot as well, and I think that's something that Will Kuntz was trying to do, right? It's just try to help this team from the ground up, starting from the academy, going to Ventura County, and ultimately to the first team, right? It's like it's all about developing these players, trying to find the next, the next Jalen Neal or the next Julian Araujo, for example, who was also on Saturday, who's also there on Saturday, forgot to mention. But in a sense, it's like it's going to help the organization a lot. And I think, yes, you're right. It's going to be attractive for not only players who are maybe free agents or who want to move, but also in terms of the kids for the academy, and maybe young kids are going to be like, hey, I want to go with the Galaxy because, or at least parents might be like, hey, I want my kid to go with the Galaxy because they know that they're having a good direction of development and things like that. You know what I mean? Like it's just a larger picture to the whole. So I think seeing that we're developing these guys and giving them moves, like you mentioned, like it's Marcus Furcranis or Gino Vivi in this instance, it's like I think it's going to be good for, in general, as a whole, for the club and the organization. And I think it's a win-win for everybody in terms of this move, right? So you can't be too, you got to like with the way that Will Kuntz has been organizing everything and really the direction that he's doing with the whole club in general.
Yeah, you talk about building from the ground up. Like that's definitely a really good look, sending Marcus Verkrans to the A League and sending Gino Vivi to the Costa Rican League. I think that's a very good look, even for our second team. I think that'll, attract a lot of players. That looks very good on his part. The fact that we're getting these young players that were an academy player and a draft pick, and we're sending them to first division flights. That's a very good look for sure, and a really good part on his really good resume so far with the Galaxy for Will Kuntz.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And you mentioned, and I forgot, yeah, Gino Vivi was a draft pick. And I've always said something about the draft that I was like, I don't really like the draft because the Galaxy normally don't do anything with our draft players. But now that I'm seeing Gino Vivi, who was a draft player, going to on a loan to a team like Saprissa, and also Tucker Lepley, who got his start or debut with the first team this week, right? So it's like now I'm seeing some more things with the draft picks, so I'm liking also that aspect as well. It's like not only just the academy kids, it's like it's also these players that we draft, which is something that I've been trying to, I guess, kind of like wanting the Galaxy to do, is just like, hey, for like make the draft useful for us. I don't think we've really had much draft picks that could be like that have been helpful, or in fact even like Daniel Aguirre. Like although we didn't draft him, he came on as like I guess undrafted, but still another college kid or someone who went through the college system, right? So now we're getting more useful within the college system and the draft pick. So I think again, it's like you're happy with the way Will Kuntz is managing everything and at least the direction that we're going. So it's like he's really utilizing every asset that he can, and that's something that I guess Chris Klein didn't really do at all in this tenure. Didn't really use any of the assets, right? It was just a matter of like, all right, if we need a position, we'll just sign a player for the X amount of money, no matter if they're good or not, right? So it's like now at least it's like Will Kuntz, it's like let's develop these guys, whether they're academy kids, whether they're college kids. Let's just try to find let's try to develop these guys and try to get the maximum potential out of these guys. So obviously, yes, like this is going to be a big deal for the Galaxy and like you said, a good look for the organization as a whole. And I think, you got to be happy with the way Will Kuntz is managing everything.
But I would say under Chris Klein is that we won games under individuals pretty much, like with Zlatan or with Chicharito. Like that's how we win games. With Will Kuntz, I feel like we're winning a lot of games this year with actual structure and an identity with us that's becoming really strong. And you see it at all of the levels, like with the Galaxy winning the U17 MLS Next Cup last year, and Ventura County having a massive bounce back season in their second year, sending players off to high level leagues. Obviously, the LA Galaxy first team's having a good season this year, top 3 in the Western Conference, and their DPs that they signed are productive. You're really seeing the effect all around it. It feels like an organizational thing rather than just individuals like it was under Klein.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's now the matter, and again, it's just like not the matter of just trying focusing on just the first team. It's affecting the whole organization as a whole. Like we gotta maximize everything that we have and all the resources that we have. So it's like, yeah, like obviously you gotta like the way Will Kuntz is running everything. So yeah, obviously it's definitely a big change compared to what we had with Klein, and again, it's a good direction for the team, and hopefully, we keep doing things like this, and again, we find a gem within one of these guys, right, within the academy or Ventura County. Hopefully we find the next big guy or big star within our youth system, right? So that's a good thing as well. But anyways, that was the Gino Vivi news, of course. He's going on a 6-month loan, so we hope for the best. Before we go into our preview, another Ventura County update. They did have their last game, which was tied 2-2. They won in PKs. Again, I don't really watch much of Ventura County, but I'm assuming you watched the game. How'd you feel about that game and just in general for Ventura County?
Yeah, they also played the Saturday, like when we were off too, so I'll talk about that one first. That was an absolutely insane game. Ventura County were up 2-0, then they eventually trailed 3-2 to the Timbers. And then at the last kick of the game, they scored the game-time goal to send it to penalties, and then they won in penalties in Portland, which was a massive deal, and that was a very good result to fight back and ultimately get 2 points out of that game. And yesterday too, yeah, a very back-and-forth game, a very impressive result because Ventura County were missing a lot of players. Obviously, they were missing Johnny Perez, they were missing Gino Vivi, they were missing Ruben Ramos, they were missing Tucker Lepley, they were missing a lot of guys that were with the Galaxy or possibly going on to a transfer. So yeah, definitely a very impressive result on the road in Colorado to take that 2-2. B-Boot's been playing very well. They take it to penalties and they win yet again. And Brady Scott, let's go back to Will Kuntz. That was an off-season get for us. And guess what? Brady Scott right now is 4-0 in MLS Next Pro PK shootouts. He's won all 4 of the shootouts he's been in. And he's been outstanding. Yesterday, he made some really big saves for Ventura County. He was really good. he's been an amazing offseason get. He's really helped turn that team around, been one of their best players, been one of the best goalkeepers in MLS Next Pro. Honestly, he's been super good. A great offseason get by Will Kuhns. And yeah, they got 2 points in Colorado, 2 points in Portland, undefeated in shootouts 4-0. They look pretty good. They've gotten ways to stay in games. Obviously, they were missing a lot of players yesterday who are offensive players, but yeah, definitely a good result for them for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like again, just looking from afar, they've been playing good. And yeah, I forgot about the whole Portland game because I heard that was just an insane game in the way they came back in that one and ultimately got 2 points out of that role. Which I forget about the whole like 2 point system. It's like, they kind of do a hockey style in MLS Next Pro, but it's interesting. It gives a different aspect to, how you win games, how you tie games, and things like that. So I think it's interesting in that sort of aspect. But yeah, obviously, Ventura County really stepping it up, and again with adversity, like you said, for the last game without having some of their star key players like Lepley, like Gino Vivi, and Ruben Ramos, right? So it's like without having those guys in there, they still managed to get a result, which I think is huge, right? Like that's huge for Ventura County. And again, you mentioned Brady Scott, and also you mentioned before it was just in general the coaching, right? The coaching and the way they've been managing Ventura County as well has been big for them. So obviously, yeah, I mean, kudos to Ventura County. Obviously, hopefully they keep it up, and they've been having a great season so far. So, yeah, obviously big results for them, and obviously, we hope for the best for those guys, right? All right then. But that was a Ventura County update there. So yeah. Anyways, and also Galaxy news as well. So now let's go into our previews for this week. Like we mentioned, we have 2 previews this week. Wednesday against NYCFC at home, and then Saturday against RSL. 2 massive games this week. Obviously, for the home game, you're going to want to win at home. And then obviously RSL being first place in the West is going to be a massive one in terms of the standings. But of course, let's start off with NYC first. Another home game coming off a big home win with the 4-2 against Sporting Kansas City. What are your thoughts going up against New York, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely going to be a very difficult game. NYCFC just came off winning 5 games in a row, so imagine we could do that, right? I mean, we've been waiting for that forever. We still can't. We even win 3 games in a row, so I feel kind of jealous in a sense. But yeah, they had a 5-game winning streak. They were doing really well, and then they played Columbus, and they had a man sent off, and they still managed to score 2 goals with playing with 10 men on the field against the defending champions. So like even then, they probably still feel very good about themselves. They lost, but still they're feeling good. They're playing super well. They're one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They're a team that's given us a lot of trouble in the past. Yeah, I'm kind of worried about it, honestly. Like, I think this game, we kind of do need Ricky Puig a little bit. Like, yeah, like we won our 3 home games, first of all, in the 4 out of 5 game stretch, but like NYCFC is significantly better than all 3 of the teams we beat. It's going to be a very tough opponent. They're very well organized. They have a lot of talented players. We haven't done that good versus the Eastern Conference either. Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that like we could come in with 2 home wins in a row, and that's going to be very important. We want to get that second home win, but it's going to be significantly more difficult than it was in those other games, right? And if Ricky Puig can't go, obviously Brugman's not going to be able to go. And it might be a hard game, honestly. It might be a difficult game for the Galaxy, and it should be interesting to see how it goes. But, I mean, again, you're going to look to Peck, you're going to look to Joveljic, you're going to look to Painstow, who said he might be 75 to 80 minutes fit by this game. You're going to look to those guys to really produce for you. And yeah, for the defense, you can't have those sloppy mistakes anymore. Like we won versus Kansas City while giving up some mistakes, but you do those against New York or RSL, you're going to be dropping some points there for sure, if not all 3. So yeah, it's going to be a very tough game. I'm curious to see what would happen, but yeah, it's going to be a tough game. That's all I got. NYCFC just came off winning 5 games in a row. They are coming off a travel, so, maybe that could do something going all the way across the country midweek. But they also played on Friday, so they had the extra day of rest. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very tough matchup.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Obviously, New York has been playing very well. And yeah, I mean, obviously, like for the team, I think you got to be in your A game on this one. Obviously, Ricky Puig could possibly be back for this week. That's just all they said, that he could be back this week. I don't know if that means that's for for New York or for RSL. But obviously, it's a very hard week because you're now going to have to manage which game you're really going to focus on, and it's kind of hard to focus one over the other because I think both games are really important, right? It's like one's a home game against a very tough team, and you're going to have to maximize all those home points before you go on the road against an RSO, right? So I think it's going to be a very tough game for the Galaxy in a sense. And yeah, I mean, for New York, I think, just for them, they're coming off a good run, and I think the Galaxy are going to look at that and say like, hey, we just got to keep focus, keep 10 toes down, and everything like that, right? So for them, it's going to be very good. For them, they got to focus, they got to go with the right mindset, just like they did with Sporting Kansas City. But I think it just will be a little bit more. It's going to be a lot tougher for I guess, the quality of the team with New York, right? Obviously, they're just a much better team. And yeah, like out of the home games, like you mentioned, the last recent home games, like this is the toughest one. So yeah, obviously they're going to have to be on their A game against New York. But, yeah, I mean, but I think the most important part is to maximize those home points and try to get the 3 points at home before you go into RSL. And I think that's where, you know, and I think this is going to be a week where you got to focus one game at a time for sure. Again, this is going to be a tough week for sure for the Galaxy.
I'll still argue the home game is more important than the road game, right? I know it's an Eastern Conference opponent, but we're playing at home, and New York is coming all the way across the country midweek. So they could be a little tired. Obviously, they got a red card last week, so maybe they have a good player suspended who's going to change the way they play. So I think you got to go out them really quickly. You got to go for that home game for sure. You want to stay undefeated at home. You want to try to get 3 points there. So I'd say between the two games, I still think the New York one is probably a little bit more important since we'll be at home.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Like obviously, like I said, you got to maximize those home points, for sure. I will say though, Galaxy do have a pretty big advantage, and that advantage is the field size. Obviously, New York having one of the most narrowest fields because they play in a goddamn baseball stadium. Galaxy have one of the more wider fields in the league, so I think for the Galaxy, that's going to be massive for them and how they play. Obviously, we're a team that especially this season where we really use our wingers. So I think this is going to be a game also for Painstill and for Peck to really, be those DPs to really step up in this game as well because of the field size, right? So I think, and like you mentioned, New York is coming all the way across the country midweek. That's going to be tough for them as well. So I think, New York has some things that they need to overcome. And I think for the Galaxy, you also have to look at that and say, hey, like, well, although this is a tough team, we still got some pretty big home advantages going into that game. So I think they got to just utilize those advantages going into this week as well. And I think that's going to be also massive for the team if they can utilize them too, right?
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely for sure. This is going to be a tough game against New York, but we got to get those 3 points at home. Got to keep being undefeated at home. And again, New York is going to be that team that's going to want to say, hey, we gave the Galaxy their first loss at home of the season, right? So they're going to do that as well. But anyways, any other thoughts you want to say about NYC before we move on into RSL?
Yeah, just like the FC Dallas game, we're coming off a home win. We want to get that second home win in a row. We're obviously playing 4 out of 5 at home. Going 4 for 4 in the homestand would be very good against a very good New York City team. Like you said, we got to take advantage of what we have going for us. We got to try to get that second home win in a row, and hopefully we get that.
Yeah, hopefully for sure. Got to get those 3 points at home and use those advantages that we have going into this week, right? So, and also we just got to go with the right mindset against that New York team. So, but yeah, that was New York, of course. That was our first game of this week, and then our second game this week is going to be against RSL, which is another big game at RSL. RSL are currently first in the Western Conference. It's very tight right now in the top part of the Western Conference, so this is going to be a big game for just in general the standings. And last time we played RSL, we end up getting a tie. We end up getting some final second heroics from Miguel Berry in that game. So, of course, this is going to be a massive game going up against RSL. But yeah, what are your thoughts about RSL? How do you feel about that game? And, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously RSL is a very difficult opponent. I think their last home game, they won 5-1 at home against Austin, a team that actually gave us one of our 3 losses this year. So that's going to be difficult for sure. They have a lot of quality on the field. They have the altitude that's going for them. Yeah, they have a very good team. They're very good at home. Obviously, we matched up closely versus them last time. It was a 2-2 game. We were trailing 2-0. But also, you could say we created a lot of chances versus them. So if we can create that chances again, that could be good. Obviously, Ricky Pooch, his status is questionable. So, is he going to play that game? Is he not? Is he going to play versus New York and not play versus Salt Lake? So that matters a lot. Honestly, what I would say is, obviously, people are going to say, let's say we don't win 3 games in a row this week and we had the chance. They're going to say, oh, Vanny can't win 3 games in a row. But, realistically, if we got, a win versus New York City and a tie versus Salt Lake, I think that's a very good week, honestly. I think getting a result in Salt Lake would be very good. I think that would be impressive. Obviously, I would love to get 3 wins in a row, and if we could possibly do that, that would be extremely impressive, especially if I was there to celebrate it when we finally did that. That would be a very cool moment, but yeah, I think a result in RSL would be good. If we did get a draw, that wouldn't be too bad of a result going there. But also that would mean I'd want to win the New York game to possibly get some points. I wouldn't want to get just 2 draws this week, or 2 losses would be even worse. So I'd say maybe try to go for a win and a draw, maybe 2 wins. But yeah, getting a result in Salt Lake would be alright because it's a very difficult opponent.
Yeah, definitely. Just I feel like getting a result just in RSL would be massive, and I also forgot you're going to RSL to actually watch the game, so that's awesome for you. But definitely, yeah, we just got to get. I think, yeah, if we get 4 points this week, I think that's a big dub for the Galaxy. For this week, but obviously, we're gonna have to see how New York goes and things like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think if we get a win against New York and we get a tie against RSL, I think that's pretty big for the team. And yeah, honestly, like I'm not even going to go into that game thinking if we do win against New York, I'm not even going to think that we're going to get 3 wins in a row. I just got to wait to see it to believe it, right? So it's just one of those instances where like you're not going to believe it until you see it. So yeah, but obviously, I think if we don't get the third win in a row, but we get like a tie, I think, yeah, that would be pretty big for the Galaxy. And I think, just in general, getting a result up there in RSL would be good. But yeah, that's going to be a tough game as well, considering with the standings and everything like that. So, yeah, definitely an important game, but also if we get a tie, I wouldn't be mad about it either. I think that'd be good for them.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously that's going to be a tough game as well. You have any other thoughts about the RSL game before we go on?
Yeah, very difficult opponent going up there. It's going to be a very good test, obviously, against the current first place team in the Western Conference. I mean, hey, last time we played the first place team in the Western Conference, Vancouver, at the time, like, we beat them 3-1, so maybe we can have some sort of a similar game, make some sort of similar statement, but obviously I think RSL is a better opponent than Vancouver was, and it's going to be a tough game for sure. We got to go in there. We can't make mistakes. We have to defend very well. We have to create chances, and hopefully we can come out of there with some sort of result.
Yeah, and just like how we said we had advantages for against New York going at being at home. RSL definitely has a big advantage with the whole altitude, right? So that's also going to be a big factor for this team, dealing with the altitude as well. So yeah, obviously it's always tough to play in RSL. I feel like we've always had struggles, going up against RSL in RSL. So obviously I don't expect it to be any easier this week, right? So yeah, definitely going to be a tough opponent for sure. But like we always say, we can always hope for the best, right? But anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. Like we mentioned, we got 2 games this week. Pretty massive week this, for the team. So we got to hope for the best. But we can't thank you guys for listening and watching this episode. If you want to follow us on social media, follow me at Insider Galaxy on Instagram, on X. Go follow LA Galaxy Central on Instagram. And yeah, obviously, thank you guys for listening. Anything else you want to say to the listeners before we go?
Hopefully we have a good week this week.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, obviously, it's going to be a massive week, and hopefully we make the most out of it for sure. But it's going to be a tough one. But yeah, be a friend, tell a friend about the podcast, whenever you're listening to this podcast. And we can't, thank you all enough for, tuning in, and hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your week. And yeah, hopefully y'all have hopefully y'all are good. But thank you guys, and G's up.
7 words.